Hi, I'm Francis Hellier, and welcome to my brand new podcast, Metaverse. This is a podcast for the future-minded, a series for anyone on the hunt for the next big thing and all its possibilities and implications. This is Tomorrow's World Today. With each episode, I will chat to those at the top of their fields, from futurists in crypto and space travel to forecasters in business and tech. Together, we will ask the question, what's next? Today, I'm joined by Bob Gale, Oscar-nominated screenwriter, producer, and director. Bob is best known for co-writing the science fiction comedy film Back to the Future with writing partner Robert Zemeckis and the screenplays for its two sequels. The award-winning film grossed over $200 million in the US in 1985, making it the year's #1 box office attraction. Bob co-produced all three films and served as associate producer on the subsequent animated TV series. He also wrote the book to the show Back to the Future the Musical, and is often noted as the gatekeeper for the franchise. Bob, I am absolutely honored to have you on the show. I couldn't sleep last night fanboying about all the different questions I wanted to ask you. So it's a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I hope you've had enough coffee then, if you didn't get any sleep.
I've had about 8 coffees this morning.
Uh-oh.
So let's start way back at the beginning. Let's go back to the past, as it were. Back to the Future celebrated its 35th anniversary last year. It's my favorite movie. It's rightly regarded as one of the best time travel movies ever made. Can you talk us through how you came up with the premise and how you actually managed to write that first film?
The premise came about in the summer of 1980. I was visiting my parents' hometown outside of St. Louis, Missouri. For whatever reason, I came across my father's high school yearbook in the basement. It was something I'd never seen before, and I attended the same high school that my dad did. So I picked up the yearbook and I thought, hey, okay, this would be cool. Let me see what my high school looked like in 1940. And lo and behold, as I flipped through it, I discovered my father had been the president of his graduating class, something I had no idea about. And I'm looking at this picture of my father being all prim and proper and political, and thinking about the guy who was the president of my graduating class, who was somebody I had nothing in common with and somebody with whom I'd have nothing to do. And I wondered, was that the kind of guy that my dad was in high school? And if I had gone to high school with my dad, would I have even been friends with him? And that is when the proverbial lightning bolt hit my head. And I thought to myself, wow, Bob Zemeckis and I have always kicked around the idea of doing some kind of a time travel story, but we never had figured out what the hook for it would be. And that was the hook. That was just such a wonderful idea. So when I came back to California, I told Bob this idea, and he got all excited, and he said, yeah, and mom could go to the same high school, and all the things that your parents tell you that they didn't do, they did, and that they did do, they didn't. And within, I don't know, about a month, we had enough of a story worked out where we were in a position to pitch it to Columbia Pictures, which is the studio where we made our previous film, Used Cars. We had a very good relationship with the president of the studio, Frank Price, who had told us, even though Used Cars hadn't been a hit, he said, I like you guys, I like your style, bring your next idea to me, please. So we went to Frank and we started telling him this story, and he got it instantly. I mean, it was the shortest pitch meeting I've ever done. And actually, Zemeckis wanted to keep telling him more and more. And I kept going, stop, Bob, stop. He gets it. He's gonna go for it. So within a week, we had a deal to write an untitled script, which then we titled Back to the Future. We did 2 drafts for Columbia. This was February and April 1981, I believe the cover dates are on those. They passed on the project. They decided that our kind, gentle family sort of thing in there was not box office in a world that was seeing comedy movies like Stripes and Porky's. So they gave it back to us to try to set it up at another studio. And we were rejected over 40 times by other studios and production companies. And we never stopped believing in the project. But finally, Bob Zemeckis said, you know what, I'm getting too depressed, getting rejected all the time. I've got to direct again. I'm going to take the next decent script that comes over my desk and that was Romancing the Stone. So we made Romancing the Stone. That's Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner. It became an unexpected big hit. Everybody wanted to make Bob Zemeckis' next movie. The movie that he wanted to make more than anything was Back to the Future. Steven Spielberg had just set up Amblin Entertainment at Universal Studios. Of course, we already had a relationship with Steven, and we went back to Steven and said, "Hey, Steven, can we do this?" And he said, "Yeah, let's do it." So there you go.
Amazing. I was secretly hoping you were going to say you fell over and hit your head on a toilet seat, and that's where the idea came from. But it's still a good story. We're going to go with that. Back to the Future is one of those really rare examples of a time travel story that makes sense within its own logic. Were there any particular elements of the story that you really struggled with to sort of sort out logistically in terms of your the storytelling? And how did you finally get to the point where everything clicked?
We would always write using what we call the index card method. And that's when you'd figure out your scenes. You'd write a thumbnail of what the scene is supposed to be or do dramatically and pin it up on the wall. And you might not do this in a linear fashion. For example, one of the early ideas that we had was that Marty McFly was going to invent rock and roll. So we said, okay, if he's going to invent rock and roll, then we have to establish that he can play rock and roll. So that gave us 2 index cards that had to be put in there. Same thing with the skateboard. We thought it would be really cool if he could invent the skateboard in 1955. So we had to establish that he could skateboard in 1985. So eventually we would have these checkerboard cards, and we could move them around, which is the advantage of doing this stuff on index card, because you can move them around. And we developed a structure. And I read all the great time travel novels and stories, and we were both fans of The Twilight Zone and the George Powell Time Machine from 1960. So we were, very into time travel and paradoxes and avoiding paradoxes and all that sort of stuff. The logic just kind of developed out of it. And I remember that when we were shooting the scene at Lone Pine Mall, where Marty sees himself being attacked by the Libyans, that created a lot of discussion among the crew, whether that, what the reality of that was and what the physics of that was. And, could somebody be in 2 places at once? Which all that stuff is always fun to think about. And the more beer you have, the more fun it is to think about it. We just wanted to make sure that everything fit together. Another movie that was kind of a model for us was It's a Wonderful Life. That really played a bigger part in part 2. But again, this is, we are big believers in the set it up, pay it off school of writing, that the rules have to be established and then the rules cannot be violated. So if we say that the DeLorean has to go 88 miles an hour and have 1.21 gigawatts at the same time for time travel to occur, it's never going to be 45 miles an hour and 200 megawatts. It always has to be that. And we've all seen movies where they change the rules halfway through the picture, and you're just kind of saying, wait, they told us that that they weren't going to do that, or that was impossible. And suddenly he says, oh, by the way, we figured out a way where we can do that. To me, that's very lazy writing. So you want to let the audience in on what your rules are, so that they're with you and they can even be ahead of you. And then they're not ever disappointed and they feel that they're not cheated. Whether the rules make any sense or not, that's a whole nother kettle of fish. But that doesn't matter, because as long as you establish working rules and stick with them, the audience will go with that.
Personally, Marty McFly and Doc Emmett Brown were, up there with Spock and Kirk and Doctor Who and all these wonderful characters from my childhood. And the story of Back to the Future is almost interwoven with my own and all of my friends. I mean, we all still watch the movie regularly. We all still think about it. I mean, I think those characters live beyond the films. And so where would the inspiration, I mean, you mentioned the yearbook, where the inspiration for the characters come from?
Well, the characters, like all the characters that we write, you know, there's a little bit of us in all of our characters. When I was a kid, my next door neighbor was a professional photographer, and he had a dark room in his basement. And I remember going over to his house with the film that I shot with my little Kodak camera, and he would develop it, and he'd take me and my brothers into his dark room, and he was sort of like Doc Brown to us. You know, he did this magic. He had this really cool equipment, and you know, to a 10-year-old back in 1960, 61, it was blowing our minds that he could do this. He was a magician. So that relationship, that sort of the idea that there was this guy in your neighborhood who could do amazing technological things, that kind of grew out of that. But there is also in American mythology, folklore, of course, the story of the lone inventor that creates the breakthrough in his garage or in his basement. And there is the subsidiary bit of folklore that somebody invented the reusable match or the internal combustion engine that gets 200 miles per gallon, that the big companies stifle and won't let us have that stuff. So those things, those were very much in our head when we created Doc Brown. Again, to make him human, we didn't want him to be the total typical mad scientist. The dialogue watchword was that for the most part, Doc uses a big word when a little one would do. So instead of saying they're going to a dance, they're going to a rhythmic ceremonial ritual. But when he gets excited, he resorts to an occasional spurt of profanity or just, colloquialism. And as much as he is into the science of everything, he's also very much aware of the world around him. So when he's out there in the movie, getting ready for the science experiment, and the cop comes by and he asks him, do you have a permit for that? You see Doc pull out his wallet. We know that what he did was he gave the cop $20 and that was his permit. So that's the type of stuff that just makes him into, a three-dimensional, colorful character. And the idea that Marty, he's the fifth father figure that Marty doesn't have. George McFly couldn't do any of the stuff that Doc Brown does, so Marty is attracted to him. And Marty, being a typical American teenager, when everybody in town says, whatever you do, don't associate with Dr. Emmett Brown, he's a lunatic, he's going to go there right away. That's the first place that he's going to go.
When you were creating the franchise, obviously a big part of the movie is exactly as it says on the tin, is looking to the future and making predictions. If you were to write the movie today, what predictions would you make about the future?
Whatever predictions I would make about the future would turn out to be wrong. They always do. Even when we predicted flying cars, we really knew there weren't going to be any flying cars. People always ask me, well, Bob, you think we're going to get flying cars? And I say people have enough trouble driving in 2 dimensions. It might not be a good idea to give them the Z axis to maneuver around in. I think that there will be further major advances in medicine. I think that when you want to look at an author who saw a lot of where we are today, Michael Crichton's, he predicted an awful lot of stuff that we have today. The surveillance society that is permeating everything, the fact that we're being tracked, the fact that we are voluntarily being tracked. Do you agree to these terms? Yes, I agree. And the next thing you know, these major corporations are inside of your computers. They know everything that you do. They know everything that you buy. They know every movie that you go to see. They know every show on Netflix that you watch. That stuff's pretty scary. So, and what we've seen with COVID, of course, there's a lot of dystopian stuff that certainly bothers me. The idea of having to prove that you've been vaccinated, that's one step down a slope that I don't think is a good slope to go down, because if they can ask you for proof of COVID vaccination, are they going to ask you for proof of smallpox vaccination? Are they going to ask you, are you on birth control pills? Do you have epilepsy? All these type of questions that I think it's none of their business. I've always said, if we want the automobile accident fatality rate to drop to zero, all we have to do, it's very simple. All we have to do is reduce the national speed limit to 10 kilometers an hour. And anybody who crashes head on into another car, they're going to walk away from that. But nobody's going to put up with that. So life is full of risk. And everybody has said, hey, the risk of me getting in an automobile accident is worth it for me to be able to drive 100 on the motorway, right? So these are all things that I think about all the time. How they would be incorporated into another movie or predicting in the future, I don't know. But these are things going on today that obviously they weren't even. There was no internet in 1985. It's disturbing, to say the least.
I mean, I don't know about you, Bob, but I only drive at 88 miles per hour. I don't drive at any other speed. So, I mean, I'm not quite sure.
Cups of coffee too.
Yeah, I'm flying. When you wrote and created the first Back to the Future, did you consider that there would be sequels? Was that part of the plan at the beginning, or was it something that the studio came to you and said, "Listen, this has been a fantastic hit. Can you create more?" Yeah,
the second one. We had no idea that the movie was going to be a hit. Bob Zemeckis has said on many occasions, if we knew we were going to do a sequel, we never would have had Jennifer get in the car at the end of the first movie, because when it came time for us to try to figure out part two, we said, what are we going to do with Jennifer? She's kind of the fifth wheel here. We literally knocked her out. She's unconscious for almost the entire Back to the Future Part 2. That was what we came up with to deal with her. So.
What is it about the films that have stood the test of time? It resonates across generations, and it feels like the movie gets better and better every time you watch it. What's so special about Back to the Future that you think has created this wonderful story that just keeps getting better all the time?
Well, there are two aspects of it, and neither one of them has the slightest thing to do with science fiction. Every person in the world has a moment when they're 7, 8, 9 years old, when they fully comprehend, my parents were once children. That is a cosmic idea when you're a child, to suddenly realize, oh my God, they were riding bicycles and playing in the sandbox. And then when you get a little bit older and you find out about the birds and the bees, you realize this is how I got here. And my parents actually did that. And so everybody kind of wonders, well, what did my parents do on their first date? Who made the first move? Where was I conceived? You think about that. You might not want to think about it too much or too long, but everybody's thought about it. And so Back to the Future really captures that in a way that had never been captured before. And that moment in the cafe in 1955, when Marty looks at his father as a gawky 17-year-old teenager, and that expression, that shot when you see George McFly in profile, and you just kind of see Michael J. Fox coming, looking over. It's so wonderful, and everybody in the audience is just loving that. And now the other thing that Back to the Future does is it tells us that little decisions that you make, little choices that you make, can have a profound effect on your life and possibly on the world. And we get to see in Back to the Future two versions of the life of the McFly family. One where George does not stand up to Biff, and one where he does. And again, this is something that everybody thinks about. Gee, did I make a mistake going out with that person? Oh, I wish I hadn't ordered that chicken. It was so bad. Did I take the wrong job? You think you write these stories in your head. What if I could just undo that one thing? What if everybody lays in bed at night and they play back things that they did, and you go, damn, I should have said this. I should have told that guy this, right? And if I had done that, I wouldn't have this problem that I'm going to have to deal with tomorrow. So this is, again, it's a very, very human thing that we all do, and we never get the chance to experience the world as it would have been if we had done that thing that we are thinking about. Now, ironically, the story of making the movie of Back to the Future is also the story of the movie of Back to the Future, because as you probably know, we shot 5 weeks of the picture with Eric Stoltz as Marty McFly. So we existed in a universe of seeing Back to the Future played by a different actor. And luckily for us, we were able to undo that universe and change our lead actor. And we have given the world the correct universe that they should have, which is Michael J. Fox playing Marty McFly. So again, we experienced that in a way, and it's just amazing to think about that stuff and how interwoven things are in life and in the reflection of life that's our movie. Yeah, it's great.
It's incredible. Now, looking back to last year, March 2020, I was very fortunate to be at the opening night of Back to the Future, the musical, in Manchester. Again, traveling up on the train from London, couldn't contain myself with excitement. Arriving at the theatre and seeing the DeLorean parked outside, everyone rushing to have their photograph taken with this iconic car, and just the atmosphere and buzz of the audience was incredible, palpable excitement. And then just a few short days later, COVID hit, lockdown happened. Can you talk us through, first of all, the sort of gestation of the musical, and then what happened when the lockdown hit, and how did everyone cope with that?
Well, it was a long gestation of the musical. The idea came from Bob Zemeckis' wife in 2005, and then Bob, Al Silvestri, Glenn, and I started really taking it seriously in 2006. So the first 2 songs that were written for the musical were written in 2006. They're still in the show, not in exactly the same form they were written, but you can listen to those songs and you say, yeah, okay, yeah, I get it. Yeah, they're in the show. We were movie guys. Glenn was purely a music guy. None of us had done theater. And we thought, all we have to do is find a smart producer and our problems will be solved. No, we met many producers who were considered smart. And we were told either, you could never do Back to the Future on a stage, it's too complicated. Or, well, maybe you could do it, but you guys, you're not ever going to be able to do it. You've never done theater before. Well, and that was a deal breaker because we all vowed to each other that we were going to be in charge of this show. Bob and I were going to be in charge of the book, and Al and Glenn were going to be doing the songs. And we were all 4 of us going to work together because that was the only way that we could ensure that a Back to the Future musical was going to be Back to the Future. We were never going to farm this out, turn it over to strangers. It's our child. We're not doing that. So because of that, it took us a very long time, and it was Glenn Ballard who was hired to be lyricist on Ghost, the musical, produced by Colin Ingram. So he was the first of us who got some real theatrical experience. And he called us up one day and he said, you guys need to meet this producer, Colin Ingram. He's got the right kind of energy for us. He loves Back to the Future. He loves the idea of doing it. And so when Ghost opened in New York, I went to see the show, to meet Colin, and I liked him a lot. And then we got Colin on board, and we had a false start with the director who turned out to not be the right guy. That made us kind of regroup and say, you know what, we cannot depend on even a director from the outside to do all this. We really have to put up all the critical signposts. So Alan Glenn wrote some more songs. I wrote another version of the book. We put a showcase on in 2017. We videotaped that. Colin took that around, and praise be to heaven, John Rando responded to it. A fantastic man, a fantastic director, a walking encyclopedia of musical theater, a man with a wonderful sense of humor who got everything that we were trying to do. So that truly was a match made not in space, but in heaven. And we got John on board, and with his insight and input and guidance, we put on our first workshop, actually literally 3 years ago at the Dominion Theater. So we put on several workshops to get us to where we got. The folks from the Manchester Opera House came to that first workshop, and they were just elated and said, okay, you have our theater. Whenever you guys are ready, we will book you. So that was great. Turns out 6 of the members of that original workshop are still in the show. And 5 of them are major lead characters, including Marty Doc, Lorraine George, Goldie Wilson, and then Will Haswell, who plays Dave McFly and Mr. Baines. So, and they tell me that never happens, that the people that you get from your first workshop, maybe one of them will actually go on and be in the real show. But we had 6, so there was something magical about that. Okay, so the next part of your question about how did COVID affect us? Well, the good news was that we got to have our press night. That was so important because it was out of that press night that Mrs. Andrew Lloyd Webber attended, and she loved the show, and she wanted it booked into one of their theaters. And John Rando had always wanted it in the Adelphi. So because we had a press night, we got the theater in the West End that we wanted the most. Was it devastating that we had to shut down a few days later? Absolutely. I had a lot of friends who were planning to come over to see it. They were disappointed. People, obviously, all the people that bought tickets that couldn't go, they were disappointed. But what can you do? If you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans, right? But because all theater was shut down, we didn't have to worry about our cast going off to take competing jobs because there weren't any jobs for them to take. And, as Ollie Dobson, who plays Marty, and Roger Bart, who plays Doc Brown, they both said, where else am I going to get a part as good as this? Of course, I'm going to keep myself available because this is a part I want to play more than anything in the world.
The cast are incredible, and I think what's interesting about this is, for example, Michael J. Fox is so intertwined with Marty McFly. I mean, that's his character, but in the musical, the actors playing those roles take on the parts themselves. They make the roles their own, and I think what's particularly joyous about the musical is not only do you relive the story of the movie, there are certain differences and changes to the script and the story, very slight, but also it just adds extra color, doesn't it, to the film? And I think that's why it's such a joy to watch, because it's something you recognize, like a fine wine has aged so well. But equally, there is a lot more depth to the musical than perhaps even the film.
And that's because they sing. That's really when a character has to sing a song. mean, when Doc sings the song in Act Two, Dreamers, you learn so much about him. It gets me every time I hear it. It's such a wonderful song. And the song that Put Your Mind to It, that Marty and George do, and it brings us a house down every performance. And you just see how this relationship between these two guys is building, and how Marty is really teaching his father to be how to be a man. You know, Lorraine and her, you know, her pent up sexuality, which comes out in her numbers. And then we've expanded the role of Goldie Wilson, because again, we made the movie. We didn't know how this was going to work, who we were going to cast, and it turned out that Don Full-Love, who played him, brought so much, even though he's only in the movie for 5 or 6 minutes. Everybody remembers him, and we said, "Wow, since the audience loves this guy so much, let's give the audience more of him in the musical. Let's give him a song. Let's bring him back in Act Two, and let's tweak his arc a little bit so that he has a progression, which pays off beautifully and works really nicely, and it just adds, as you say, it adds extra dimension to the story that everybody already knows, because we can't spend the time doing cinematic fireworks, because we can't do that on a stage. So what we do instead is use the stage and use the format of musical theater to do what stage and musical theater do best. And I think that's one of the reasons why the musical is being embraced by our fans so much, and by even people who aren't our fans. We've had many people come to see the show. Believe it or not, they've never even seen the movie.
There's no person on earth, Bob. There's no person on earth that's not seen Back to the Future. Surely, I want to meet that. I want to meet that person and question them.
You come to any of our shows and just kind of hang around. Look, we had yesterday. There's a program to bring disadvantaged kids into the theater and give them a theatrical experience. We had, I don't know, about 50, 60, maybe 80 kids who were, 10, 11 years old. This was the first time they had ever been in a theater. This was the first show they'd ever seen. And I would bet that a huge percentage of them had never seen the movie. I will bet that within 2 or 3 weeks, every one of them will have seen the movie. But there are people that just didn't see it. Okay, all right. You can actually live a perfectly good life by not having seen it, but you live a better life if you have.
I mean, these characters they must feel like family for you.
Yes.
What did it feel like? What did it feel like revisiting them for the musical?
It is. It's like going to a family reunion, with people that you love. I will say that what makes the musical as good as it is that everybody involved in it is a fan of the movie, from the cast to the musicians to the behind the scenes folks to the stagehands. Certainly, our choreographer and our production designer and everybody on the crew, the lighting guys. And they just said, you know what? This is an iconic work. It's an iconic movie, and we have the honor and the privilege of being involved in doing the stage version, and we are going to make sure that the show meets the expectations of Back to the Future. And yes, I'm there all the time, of course, as the gatekeeper, as the writer of the book, as the one guy that knows more about Back to the Future than anybody, and to help keep that train on the tracks. So I see something, no, that's not right. Or I'd say you're doing something that's in the movie, that's not in the play. So we have to take that out and change that. And then there were little places where I could just slip in nice little Easter eggs for our fans. For example, the disappearing photograph In the original movie, we shot that at Amblin Entertainment, where there was this wishing well and proposed family there. Well, I thought to myself, that's not very interesting, really. We just did that because it was convenient. So now you get to see that the family had taken a trip to Monument Valley. And this is a nod to Back to the Future Part 3. If you've never seen Back to the Future Part 3, it doesn't matter. It's a family photograph. If you have seen it, you'll say, wow, isn't that cool? They went to the same place that Marty goes in Part 3. So I tried to put as many of those type of little things in there where people that are big fans will see them. People that aren't tuned into them, it won't matter. But just like the first movie, the more you see it, the more you see that's in it. I wanted to do that with the show. And having seen the show, and we're still in previews, at press night isn't even until Monday, they've already seen it 2 or 3 times. So that's pretty great. And they say, I'm going to see it again and again. So boy, if we've got that, we don't need to do Back to the Future 2 or Back to the Future 3. Back to the Future, the original is going to run for a long time, we hope.
So what does the future hold for you, Bob?
You know what? I'm not looking very far into the future because, COVID was just a reminder that whatever you're planning, it can be derailed. And getting the musical to the West End, getting us open, getting us to press night, that has been the singular focus in my mind ever since Manchester. And I have not thought about what's next, although actually I will tell you what's next because we expect we're going to have a German production. We expect we will have a Korean production. We expect to take this around the world. So I am going to have to be going back into the book and finding things that need special translations in each country because we have I Am Your Density in the show as a play on I Am Your Destiny, but I don't know what the German equivalent is going to be. I don't know what the Korean equivalent is going to be, but we've got to have to find something that works on the same, makes the joke funny in each different language that we translate it to. So that'll be interesting and a great experience. And hey, it means that I'll get to go to all these different countries.
Wonderful. Bob, I can't thank you enough for your time today. It's been an honor to have you on the show. I wish you all the success in the world with Back to the Future, the musical. It's playing at London's Adelphi Theatre. Book tickets online now. And, again, just thank you so much for creating something so special. And what a wonderful legacy to leave behind. Thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure talking with you, and always a pleasure talking with somebody that really knows the material. It's great. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you,
All right,
Bob.
see you in the future.
You've been listening to Metaverse with me, Francis Hellier. Thank you to my guest, Bob Gale, for a brilliant conversation. Tweet us at MetaversePod for any suggestions or feedback. And if you enjoyed the podcast, please share a link on social media. You can sign up to receive an email when a new episode drops at our website, metaverse.fm.